here, but they are bread and butter of this report. What we mean by AI being dependent on labor. One of the major myths around AI is that intelligence is entirely machine-produced. This often invisibilizes the work that goes into training, coding, labeling, and annotating algorithms. However, the deployment and development of AI relies on people engaged in poorly paid, repetitive work. This type of work is primarily performed in the Global South, is called ghost work sometimes, and is conducted by people widely believed to be, is conducted by people, but is believed widely to be an automated process. With our report today, we would like to shed light on the working conditions of humans behind AI. In 2019, the OECD adopted the recommendations of the OECD Council on Artificial Intelligence. This was a major landmark study in the development of AI ethics. The recommendation covers 5 complementary value-based principles: inclusive growth, sustainable development, well-being, human-centered values and fairness, transparency and explainability, robustness, security and safety, and accountability. These principles have had significant implications for the future of work and are also the basis of the Fair Work AI principles, which we developed through a partnership with GPAI over the years. First, we developed a set of principles that were broadly about AI ethics and AI ethics in pertaining to the labor conditions of development of AI. And then we tested and applied and improved and made these principles applicable to understand and reflect the kind of working conditions we want to see for humans of AI. What do we mean by data work? We mean data collection, sort of collection of raw data for training algorithms. We mean annotation, sort of labeling and structuring the data. We mean curation, selecting best examples, also best performing algorithms. And we mean validation, checking system outputs, whether the algorithm is working the way it should be. There's a clear distinction in how data work can be done, and I would like to make the distinction here because Fair Work works on both cloud work platforms, sort of the remote work, digital labor platforms, as well as sort of AI work. And the distinction is that one of them is business process outsourcing with employees based in an office with a traditional hierarchical organized managerial structure, and the other one is sort of a more dispersed geographical type of work where the workers can be based anywhere and they're not necessarily in the same place where the client is or where the platform is located. And this distinction about the geographies of how workers are located and how they're asked to perform tasks also also affects their working conditions and workers' expectations from the work. When I talk about the geographies of AI production networks, we sort of, refer to a couple of different things. The first one being AI workforce being spatially divided. As you can see in the global supply of online platform labor, there's a wide diversity of where the work is located, where the workers are located. Cloud work can be conducted anywhere, but supply is concentrated in the global south, meaning cloud workers are mostly located in the global south. Lead firms in the global north contract BPO centers with offices in the global south, as the case that we're going to analyze today. And as a legacy of colonialism, this aspect of AI production brings forth challenges of discrimination on the basis of geography in terms of what kind of work is accessible to, what kind of work is accessible to workers, and how it is enumerated and what the working conditions are. To talk a bit about the Fair Work project, we are an international research project based at the Oxford Internet Institute. We have been studying digital labor platforms for over 5 years now, and the project currently runs in 39 countries across the world in 5 regions. And we have 3 areas of research: location-based digital labor platforms, cloud work platforms, and AI companies. The project is coordinated by the Oxford Internet Institute, but we also have a secretariat at the WZB Berlin Social Science Center. How we do our work, how do we research? So the research has three pillars. One of them is desk research. We map platforms, companies, and analyze their contracts or the policies that we can find in the public domain. So this desk research relies entirely on research that is based on evidence that is publicly available. Then we conduct worker interviews. It says here interview with 6 to 10 workers per platform, but actually our AI work is a bit different. We, as I will mention, we interviewed 46 workers for this specific project. And then we conduct interview with managers. Again, here platform can be replaced by companies, but it is very important for us to have that kind of open communication dialogue with the companies where we can find new evidence, evidence that might not be accessible in a public domain, but also, a kind of managerial knowledge which might not necessarily be apparent or obvious to the workers. And we treat manager interviews as an open dialogue, as an ongoing process rather than a one-off interview. And then we put it all together. Final scores are collectively decided and peer-reviewed by at least 2 reviewers from the other Fair Work network of researchers. And to give a number, currently in 39 countries, we have a network of more than 250 researchers. And the way scoring system works is that we have 5 principles. Each of the principles have 2 thresholds, so a total of 10 out of 10 can be achieved. And the principles, which you can find online, Fair Work AI principles, are broadly on the basis of fair pay, fair conditions, fair contracts, fair management, and fair representation. And all of them, we consider them as achieved to be, add up to be a basic standard of fairness. Rather than an ideal or sort of an inachievable target, these principles are set up in a way that we, as workers, should have in our work for it to be considered decent work. And then, some of the digital labor platform league tables look a bit like this. Cloudwork online ratings, we rated 15 Cloudwork platforms, and this is the India ratings for 2022, but actually the 2023 ratings have also been published, so I highly recommend to those interested, if you've never heard of Fair Work before, to go check it on our website. So let's come to the report. Sama is a data annotation company specializing in computer vision. Sama employees work to produce the labeled data that enables AI systems to be developed for a wide range of use cases, from autonomous vehicles to industrial robotics. Sama is a keynote in the global production networks of AI and has conducted work for leading technological companies. Sama's vision is to pioneer new technologies and business methods that harness the power of markets for social good, leveling the playing field for those who do not share equally in the benefits of human progress. The company aims to achieve this by basing the most labor-intensive parts of their operation in East Africa, and by hiring people who have lived below the poverty line and or who have lacked access to formal employment opportunities. This practice is known as impact outsourcing. As part of our research for this report, we have done field work with Sama centers in their East African delivery centers. And the company granted access to Fair Work researchers, which consisted of conducting interviews with employees in a range of job roles and shift patterns in the East and carrying out workplace observations. The Fair Work team also interviewed Sama management remotely in the course of field work and data collection. Additionally, Sama provided the Fair Work team with further evidence about their work processes through management presentations during the team's time on the ground and in follow-up meetings after the presentation of Fair Work's initial score to them in August 2023. Sama, I would like to say, did not fund this research in any way or take part in its study design and data collection and analysis. The company exercised no veto power over the findings of this report, but our collaboration has been extensive throughout the course of our research. For Fair Work's initial findings from field work were worrying. If I was to summarize based on Fair Work principles, we found cases of overwork, non-voluntary unpaid overtime, and workers being pushed to sort of achieve targets. If they can't finish their targets, they would ask to be come on the weekends and stay at the end of their shift to complete tasks. In addition, Fair Work's fieldwork highlighted that contrary to SAMA's commitment to paying all members of their workforce a living wage, the company was using living wage recommendations as a guideline figure, and we saw that this was not applied to all workers systematically. For fair conditions, we saw excessive overwork and job strain, and workers identified that they were often physically exhausted, and they suffered from depression, burnout, mental health disorders. Although some offer 3 months of paid maternity leave to workers because they are employees, workers noted that being made redundant shortly before their due date made women workers ineligible, and this was raised as a concern. For fair contracts, short-term contracts and precarity was highlighted as a major issue that the workers were working on 1 month to 3 month contracts, with some of the workers interviewed having been in the short-term contract cycle for years. For fair management, there were significant concerns about managerial culture, workers expressing a culture of fear, and other issues in terms of, system of favoritism, or managers not or depersonalized bullying and surveillance. And for fair representation, workers expressed a general lack of collective power and voice in the company. So these findings these findings sound really concerning, and they were really worrying. Fair Work, however, commends SAMA's open dialogue and engagement after hearing our findings, which we presented to them, as I mentioned, in August 2023. Since then, the company has given Fair Work access, throughout the research, the company has given Fair Work access and was clear in their message that they wanted things to change, that they were committed to this change. As a result of this commitment, SAMA made some 24 changes to their existing policies and practices, and also committed to either speeding up the other policies that were already underway, or establish systems in place to ensure that the existing policies could be enjoyed by workers if there were any issues in workers being able to access them. I have summarized again some of the changes that SAMA committed to on the slides here, but I would like to just stress that these changes and these commitments are really important in changing the sort of the initial conditions that Fair Work we identified in our research. So, for instance, in terms of fair pay, SAMA updated the overtime policy to include the concept of time for time, and now the policy specifies that management will be disciplined if they do not follow the policy. They introduced training sessions on updated overtime policy. They established a system to monitor working hours and identify violations of overtime policy, adapted incentive structures to ensure that associates are not rewarded for overworking. And important for this principle, and what made them also meet the thresholds of this principle, is that SAMA increased worker salaries to the level of the living wage recommendation before incentives, and committed to not paying any employee a base salary that is below the living wage going forward. For fair conditions, SAMA updated employment contracts to more explicitly include information on working hours, breaks, maximum hours allowed, overtime, and benefits. They updated workplace illness and injury policies with specific coverage of work-related psychological disorders, and updated health and safety policy in collaboration with insurance provider to cover task-specific risks more extensively. The wellness charter has been expanded. They already had this wellness charter, but it has been expanded to include the following measures, including identification of illnesses mostly commonly associated with repetitive risks, repetitive tasks, training a wellness team to identify risk factors, and leading indicators to recommend mitigation measures. They have now established a clear escalation policy to help workers suffering from task-specific risks to access additional resources, and committed to tracking levels of prevalence and recommending company-wide changes to address endemic problems in the future. They created a specific channel that allows any employee to report a pregnancy without informing direct line management to prevent any sort of pregnancy-based or maternity-based discrimination. They updated whistleblowing policy to include specific reference to maternity leave, again, for the same reason. For contracts, they introduced a new policy to change default contracts from 1 month to 12 months, which is a major, major change that will improve the working conditions of the workers massively. And they established quarterly review process to ensure this new policy is being followed. And they committed to conducting further research on job market for summer employees and defining the best pathways for employees beyond the firm. For management, they initiated a zero tolerance culture campaign. This includes zero tolerance training sessions and anti-bullying and harassment seminar for employees. Results of this culture campaign will continuously be monitored via anonymous company-wide engagement surveys, which they are doing already, and specialized out-of-house training on gender-based violence claims for key HR, legal, and management personnel. And for fair representation, SAMA created a specific employee rights training to cover freedom of association and committed to investigate representation structures to increase employee involvement in decision-making across organization and at all levels of decisions. As a result of these changes, which are commendable, SAMA has been awarded 5 out of 10. They have been awarded 2 points for principal fair pay, because they're a living wage employer, 2 points for fair conditions, and 1 point for fair contracts. As I'm explaining these scores, there are 2 methodological notes I would like to make. The first one is that the absence of a point does not mean that the practice is not in place, but that as Fair Work, we have not been able to evidence that it is in place. For instance, some of the changes SAMA committed to were not able to be verified by the Fair Work team, as it would require us a second round of field work, and thus SAMA could not be awarded a point in this round. However, Fair Work hopes to conduct another round of research in 2024 to document how SAMA's commitments have changed the company culture and working conditions for workers. The other note is that Fair Work scores are structured in a way that the company can only be awarded a second point for a threshold if they have already met the first threshold, and that Fair Work does not do half points or partial scores. This is to ensure that all parts of a Fair Work principle are met, as no part, in our opinion, is more important than the other. Lastly, I would like to mention that Fair Work's pathways to change includes talking to workers, talking to companies, not platforms, policymakers in government, and organized labor sort of unions. And through this combined engagement with the stakeholders, we try to drive change, and this is what we call. This is why we call ourselves action researchers. Fair Work's, this is going to be Fair Work's first AI report, but we are going to be working on another one. And in terms of Fair Work's impact metrics so far, we have done 667 platform ratings in the 39 countries we study. And 275 changes have been committed by 64 platforms. And we have been covered in media extensively. We are academic researchers, so we continue to publish in academic publications, and we have interviewed over 5,000 workers. And we have 62 pledge signatories. It seems I forgot my pledge slide, but if you look at the Fair Work website, which is fair.work, we also invite all companies, all large organizations that either work with platforms that we research in our work, or they're part of the network that provides work to these companies, to engage with Fair Work, and also to commit to the pledge to show their support. This is all my presentation today. I look forward to your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Funda. That was really fascinating, and I'm very happy to see that we are enabling this pioneering work under GPI. I think the report is in our website, so it's available for anyone that would like to dig deeper into the details. And let us now transition to our panel and tackle some of these issues. First, allow me to introduce our panelists with a special thanks to Alex, who is joining online, and he's joining us from Canada. So it's 5 a.m. for him or something like that. Thank you.
It's 1 a.m. It's pretty late, but thank you for having me.
Thank you, Alex, for this great effort, and we will try to keep you awake. Alex, she is an executive at SAMA and an expert on our working group. His involvement has been crucial for the project success. Alex also recently took part in the Canadian Parliament hearing, emphasizing the vital importance of this topic in discussions about the future and of regulation and of AI. Janine Berg, to my left, is a senior economist at the International Labour Organization, renowned for her brilliant research. Janine is the author of the influential paper Generative AI and Jobs, a Global Analysis of Potential Effects on Job Quantity and Quality. She stands as an inspiration and role model for many, including myself, particularly among women in the field of economics and technology. Funda, you already met, and Álvaro Norma from Mexico, researcher at the National University of Mexico, and CREA, a leading company in AI. Our panelists will delve deeper into various aspects of AI production networks, covering challenges, innovations, and the trajectory of this rapidly advancing sector. And we will also have a Q&A session at the end, and we invite you all to engage with our panelists and share your perspectives. So, Alex, first to you. SAMA is, well, an early adopter. This is a first report, as Funda has explained, and has embraced the social audit conducted by an independent academic institution like Oxford, using a novel and yet to be standardized methodology under the scrutiny of GPI, meaning that over 30 countries are closely observing the process. This couldn't have been an easy decision. So what motivated SAMA to open its doors to Oxford for this evaluation?
Yeah, so maybe I can take the moment to just thank the Oxford team for doing this incredible work. Beyond even the work that they've done with SAMA, they've created a network around the world that's giving visibility to the AI supply chain and really bringing this at the forefront as a topic. SAMA as a company always wants to be at the leading edge of what can help workers in the AI field have the most equitable working conditions and have pathways to the formal economy. We started off as a not-for-profit, and we've grown to become an ethical provider of data. And so I think inviting OII in was an amazing opportunity to do two things. One, to evaluate whether our principles were being put into practice. And I think as Funda mentioned, there was work to be done. And the second was that this gave us an opportunity to create action inside of the company to push forward this amazing standard, which I hope other companies will decide to sign on to. So as you mentioned, it's a lot of scrutiny, a lot of attention, but ultimately, we truly hope that this will move forward the industry and that the member countries involved in this will see this as an opportunity to start regulating the industry to ensure that more workers around the world are paid fairly in great working conditions and that they have the opportunity to thrive rather than survive.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Janine, you've studied for a long time this new economic reality. What are some of the challenges in regulating online crowd work?
Thank you. Is this working? First of all, thank you for the... Thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel. It's great to be here. to come. We know from the World Bank estimates that there's approximately 150. How about now? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to start over because unfortunately Alex couldn't hear me and he's made the effort to stay up so late, so it's important. So first of all, I really would like to commend SAMA for opening its doors to the Fair Work Project. That's a huge step forward, and we need more companies to be doing this. I also would like to commend the team of Fair Work in Oxford for all the work they've done. They're present in over 30 countries. They've evaluated so many digital labor platforms. Most of the platforms that they've evaluated are the geographically located platforms, the taxi drivers, the delivery drivers, but they've also done a lot of work now with the online platforms. And this is a huge area of work because so many of these workers are invisible. We know from World Bank estimates that there's about 150 million people training these AI systems. I mean, this crowd knows AI very well. But many people don't realize that there's so many humans behind training the data, making sure that it works correctly, and that also that it's not putting out information that is detrimental for society. So obviously there's a lot more that needs to be done in this area, but it's really, it's such a crucial part of the value chain in this type of work. So first of all, just really want to thank both of you for opening your doors to this. The problem that we're seeing is that SAMA in some ways is different than a lot of the companies. While SAMA, you could think of it as a business process outsourcing because it's organized in the standard employee relationship. So they have employees with contracts. Now they're getting one-year contracts, which is a huge step forward. But in most cases, most of these workers are just basically they go into a platform on the internet. They can be located anywhere in the world. They set up an account. Most of them are paid through either their bank account or through PayPal, which means if they're being paid through PayPal, they're paying fees. They do the work, they submit it. If for some reason it's not labeled correctly or the algorithm doesn't think it's correct, they don't get paid. If they don't get paid, they don't have anybody to turn to. They can send an email, but many times this email is not being replied to. A lot of times they're asked to do things without very clear instructions, and they don't have a manager to call and say, this isn't actually really working out. And so many times in work, one needs to have that discussion with management. So the workers themselves are in this black box that is running the AI systems, and this is a problem. So what I'm trying to say here is, SAMA is, I really appreciate what they've done, but I also appreciate that traditional employment relationship, that model, because these online model where you're just a number and you don't know, you're an independent contractor, you have no rights, you have no benefits, you have no way to unionize, you have nobody to talk to if you become pregnant and you want maternity benefits, you're not going to receive any of these benefits. So this is a real problem. And this is something that the world of AI and that governments across the world really need to address. While on the one hand, you can see how governments would be interested in having their workers have access to this employment. They're paid in dollars or in euros, so that is a benefit. On the other hand, we want to make sure that the people can have really the decent working conditions, that they can have some minimum pay, that they're going to have the rights and benefits, that when they retire, they can have some sort of pension. So there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of regulation. So I think I'll stop here for now, and then we can...
Thank you, Janine. Funda, in your work, you shed light on the visible workers in the AI production networks. Do you think some of some or all of these jobs will be erased by automation in the near future?
Thank you. I think in a panel like this is a really crucial question because perhaps some of us want to hear that, yes, maybe some of the jobs will disappear, some of the more repetitive tasks, the more monotonous ones, that are really sort of arduous, but at the same time really crucial for training AI systems. But on the other hand, will we ever reach a point where we won't need to train algorithms? I'm not so sure about that. Because as technologies change and develop and they become better at certain things, they will still need humans to make sure that they are becoming better at certain things while not becoming worse at other things. Sort of, controlling for bias, making sure that the results are validated, they are sort of, producing the results in a way that they should be, or there might be new technologies coming that is part of AI system that we have not trained data for yet. This might be the case too. So I'm a bit more pessimistic about this, that the sort of this bottom supply chain of the AI hierarchy will ever get erased by machines, where the machines will start training themselves. Some of it perhaps will be the case, but I think it is really important that's why one of the reasons that it is really important to pay attention to the working conditions is that we might actually end up in a system where we will always need a constant supply of people working on data work, however that might be in the future.
So it's really important to ensure the working conditions, not only decent, but since they become so needed as workers in this, AI chain. Alvaro, you not only are Mexican, but also specialized in the Latin American region. How do you see this affecting this region, and do you consider this as an opportunity or as a risk?
Thank you very much. And I believe this will be, well, I'm optimistic about this technology, but there will be different outcomes. Specifically in the region of Latin America, we have some particular challenges. It is the most unequal region of the world, according to the Gini index. We have limited access to higher education, and that creates a sort of snowball effect that increases in violence, and unfortunately, it creates also forced migration due to a lack of opportunities in the region. But on the other hand, the region of Latin America is young. In average, is 30 years old, and it's also a region that is thriving. So these technologies present an opportunity to create new jobs that are better paid. That's my view on this thing. I don't know if you would like me to present a particular example or yeah. Like for example, I'm working with the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and also with a AI company. It's called CREAI. That both of them have the mission to address these challenges that we are facing in Latin America. We are working together to create an accent neutralizer solution that will allow people from different countries that their first language is not English to reduce the language barriers that they might face when they are talking to people from other countries that are English-based. So, for example, we are working with a call center that is helping Booking.com to address most of their bookings, and is based in Guatemala. But for some reason, the people that is working there has limited access to an English formal education. And that creates a barrier when they are speaking directly to customers from countries like Canada or the United States. With this solution, what we are trying to address is that they will have a better communication with them. Therefore, it will enable access to better paid jobs to people with limited communication skills and with limited education. So, well, while I totally agree with Fonda, with my colleague in this, that some of the jobs will disappear, there will be another different opportunities and new jobs will be created, especially in regions that are being developed now. So, yeah, it's an interesting topic, of course.
Thank you. I'll ask you later how the region is preparing for this better jobs that you talk about. Janine, what is the International Labour Organization doing on this?
Right. So the constituents of the ILO, as you know, is the only tripartite agency of the United Nations. So it has employer representatives, worker representatives, and of course the governments. And early this year, in March of 2023, at the governing body, it was decided that in 2025 and 2026, there would be a 2-year standard setting on decent work in the platform economy. So while many of the constituents were focused more on the location-based digital labor platforms, such as the delivery riders and the taxi drivers, as we know, these workers are part of the platform economy. So the hope would be that in this discussion, the instrument that comes out, which would either be an International Labor Convention or an International Labor Recommendation, that this instrument will provide guidance to ILO member states on how to have decent work in the platform economy. That regardless of what the decision is on whether these people are employees or not, that they be provided with rights and benefits. Because at the ILO, the rights are for workers. It's not just for employees, it's for all workers. And so it's very important that we make really an effort to extend protections and rights to these workers. So this will be the discussion. It's going to be a difficult discussion, but it should be it's an important discussion because, as we know, there's so much fear about AI stealing jobs and a jobless society. And these are jobs that are being created because of AI. So this is a huge source of employment that we're seeing across the world, and which is a good thing. So this is going to replace those jobs that are going to be automated, or it's replacing, rather, some of these jobs that are being automated in other professions. But if these jobs are not decent jobs, if these jobs are not providing a living wage for people, if they're not providing rights and benefits that people need, then we're not moving in the direction that we need to be moving as societies. So,
Alex, after your inside experience, do you think that other companies will open up like Sama has done?
I think it's going to be a difficult, very challenging study of how our competitors are working, because ultimately, Janine mentioned it earlier, Sama, we have full-time employees, we have certain benefits. We could actually action very quickly the changes that were recommended. But the rest of the competitors in the market are in a race to the bottom, and they have people that are working, part-time work that they don't necessarily have any agency within it. They don't have anybody to go to an HR department, et cetera. They're independent. And so I hope more companies will join this. But I think to the point that the ILO is putting forward, we need to start regulating and pushing forward, and giving voice to these 150 million people. How come none of the major AI bills, none of the major AI commitments speak of the future of work? How come none of those speak of the 150 million people powering AI on a daily basis? How come none of those are talking about, nationals around the world who are working hours for little pay, and nothing is decent about it? So for me, I hope more companies will join into this. But I also hope that large companies that are buying data labeling solutions will use this as maybe a way to to push out some of those bad behaviors and encourage the good. And I really think that if large companies that buy data and data labeling solutions start embedding this into their procurement practices, we'll see a huge change. But we truly, 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 all of us in this room, whether virtually or physically, have to give voice to these people. They need better working conditions. They need more stability. And to the point that Janine made, work's gonna go in that direction. So we have to make sure that we're putting in the measures in place. And one of the things that I did last week in Parliament in Canada was recommend if we just had a simple disclosure mechanism in a Canadian law, new AI law, that said, what are the conditions for work for any data that's being labeled? If we only have that disclosure, that could change the industry completely. And that would be one line in one law in one country, but that could change everything everywhere.
So true. You described, Funda, the initial findings at SAMA. How are these findings similar or different from the rest of the business outsourcing sector that Alex also was referring to? And what do you think about these differences between those who have employees and those who replicate the crowd work model, this gig economy thing?
Thank you so much. And Alex started this discussion already. He rightly commented that the employment model, and Janine also mentioned that, is quite different than the cloud work model, where the client, the company can be completely in different places geographically, and the communication might or might not be established via a platform or a third-party provider, which complicates the direct management process quite extensively. And the major difference is that the social protections which are common, let's say, to employment contracts are usually not there in the platform work. In terms of SAMA's difference from the other sort of business outsourcing companies, this is Fair Work's first study, but we are doing another one, and our work and our principles have been sort of a culmination of 10 years of research in this field of all of us. And what I can say is that the conditions are generally really, really poor. This is sort of the standard, and the expectation, as Alex also mentioned, is that this type of work is not valued. It's considered to be really repetitive and not requiring a lot of skills or training, which is not the case. If you've ever done this kind of work, it requires a lot of skill and a lot of attention to detail. However, because the work is generally located in the global south, where labor is cheaper than in global north, and because the expectation and the valuation of this work is really low, this affects the working conditions. And ultimately, this is why I think SAMA's commitment to these changes were so important, because they can set a sort of a benchmark for the sector, saying that these jobs they do not need to be in the conditions they are at. We can raise the bar collectively, and we do not need to accept the conditions that are in the sector today. And this also gives, I think, a voice and also a hope to the workers as well, because if they know of companies that are trying to do a better job, that are trying to provide better conditions, then they can either ask their companies to do the same, or they can, walk with their feet. They can try to find opportunities in the companies that are doing better. And this is why we also consider Fair Work Pledge as a really important mechanism, because then large companies or large organizations that are part of the supply chain, that either seek work through cloud work platforms or AI systems, can also sign the pledge and tell the companies that they will prefer to work with companies that score better, that where the working conditions are better. And what Alex proposed in terms of the one line to one-line regulation is not something so futuristic, I would say. For instance, in Germany, there's a supply chain law coming. It's actually in existence, but the supply chain law usually looks at the sort of the physical items, physical production networks. Whereas I think we need to expand the definition of what the production network is to include AI systems and the production of the technologies that make our lives work now. And if we manage to do this, then the conditions of the work in the sort of the various parts of the supply chain will become more will be better, and this will also shed more light on the current conditions and where things are perhaps not as desirable as they are, and where the improvements can be made, and together we could raise the bar.
Thank you. From your perspective and also yours, Alvaro, what are the policy actions or initiatives that can be taken from the policy making perspective in this space that are not necessarily regulation, because regulation doesn't solve everything and it takes a long time to agree on it, as we've seen recently with the European AI Act? That it only took 2 years or 3 years to agree upon. So, in your view, what can be done in the meantime?
Okay, so regulation takes a long time, but that's not a good reason to not have regulation. So what you need to have is regulation that is, well, a little bit quicker, but also more flexible, that can adapt to changes. It's particularly in this area of technology where there's so many changes. So really broad principles are really important. In the meantime, I think it's really what Alex pointed to. It's really about the commitment of lead firms to use providers, to use suppliers that are committed to having decent working standards. So the idea of having kind of this pressure on lead firms and to take that responsibility, I think, is really probably the most important. It's harder in this line of work. I mean, so you've seen this a lot of times in the apparel industry. It's easier to pressure brands because they're recognizable. And you've had campaigns on university campuses, for example, with clothing and so forth, to not buy certain types of clothing because of unfair labor practices. It's harder for this type of work because it's invisible. And it's harder because so many people think that AI is all magic when we know it's not all magic. So the awareness raising about the type of work, and I think there has been a huge step forward in that. When I first started working on this topic, it was 2015, and it was very obscure. And I think now you see a lot of articles in the media about unfair working practices. You had a huge expose in Wired magazine on this issue, and also the use of child labor in some of these production networks. So I think that's a huge step forward, but it would be really probably the most important would be the lead firms. And this is a very concentrated industry. We can name who are the big players in this industry. So if there were commitment by the big players to only use suppliers that have decent working conditions, that would be huge.
I completely agree. Everyone here, I guess, we are in the same page, as we think that regulation will be of paramount importance so that these ghost workers could be better paid and they will have better opportunities. Regulation usually has two phases. While it creates very desirable outcomes, sometimes it can slower the pace of this technology, which maybe it's a good thing, because as with most disruptive technologies, in this case, artificial intelligence is moving faster than the regulations. So in the particular case of Latin America, being regulated will help the ghost workers to have a better opportunities, and in some cases it could probably reduce the forced migration to other countries. Being that said, I believe it will be very important for all of us to work collectively to to regulate this industry.
Thank you. Alex, you will become co-chair of the Future Work Working Group next year. What should we be doing in GPI on this regard?
Yeah, I think we need to continue to support anything that gives visibility to the fact that AI is a supply chain and that it needs to be viewed and regulated as such. I think as we're moving forward, there are going to be incredible topics and a big focus on Latin America. So really unearthing the challenges and opportunities there are going to be key. But ultimately, the call that I would say, and I hope at this session, is that there's an opportunity to really change the lives of hundreds of millions of people. And it takes simple actions to give fair work around the world. And so that's going to be how we're going to be pushing forward, is really around this idea of taking these principles and putting them into action and helping policymakers really get a comprehensive view on what's happening, why it's happening that way, and simple ways to make a huge difference. And so I think this is even more relevant, I would say, for our audience in India, where, as Funda was mentioning, a large portion of workers are actually based in India. So this is something of domestic interest, but also of international interest. And so I would hope that policymakers are thinking about this. It takes maybe a disclosure line in the laws that are coming into place to actually make a huge difference.
Thank you for that answer. We have time for some questions from the audience, even comments. This is the only place where you will be accepted to comment. So I don't know if anyone wants to comment on something. Mike, go there.
Thank you. Thanks for this interesting discussion. I think it's more than necessary to talk about it, and I think it's very desirable to improve working conditions in that area. But I think we also need to talk about the economic perspective here, and I guess that big parts of this industry is really relying on precarious working conditions and also paying conditions. And what would it mean for the industry? For example, Alex, what kind of investment did it mean to your company to really make these improvements? And maybe also Funda, what is your experience from the other companies that you're working with? Is there a business case for sustainable working conditions? What would you say?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question, and it gets to the heart of the issue. What we realized was that when we're bidding against companies that are using a crowd, we sometimes win and we sometimes lose. And the difference in price for the ultimate client is in cents. And so the difference is our company makes less profits than other companies that are currently operating under this model. But that doesn't mean that by having good working conditions, you can't have a sustainable business. And so ultimately, we've seen a shift in the economics, I would say in the past year and a half, where before everybody was playing at the same level field, and even workers were getting not good pay, but they were getting equivalent pay to some of the BPO providers. But now there's been a huge shift where there's a huge price pressure to go down in terms of pay for workers and increase profitability. And even investment coming into the field is making it so that some providers are buying contracts and literally pushing down the price. And so creating a tremendous amount of pressure to lower working conditions and make it even worse for workers. And so right now we're at a very important inflection point. We can make the decision to not regulate, and the economics will keep pushing it down, and workers will have less rights and be paid less. And for companies like ours, the burden will be higher and higher to be competitive. And so our profitability will go maybe to zero in order to compete. But if we created a level playing field and ensured that there were minimum standards, I feel like everybody would play in that playing field, and it would be beneficial for workers, for companies, and for those large firms that are buying most of the data labeling services.
Thank you. This is a really good question, and a question that actually we often get at Fair Work. What about the business case? And do the companies have any incentive to commit to these changes? The answer is obviously yes for me, but it's also based on a discussion that we have been having with the companies directly. One of them is perhaps really important to mention here is investment. The investors that the companies are trying to engage with are increasingly preferring better companies, putting their names behind companies that are trying to do a better job, that are providing, that are taking, sort of considering the ethical implications of their investments. And yes, while sort of massive scaling and sort of increased returns on their investments is always a priority, there's a consideration of for their public image too, and this is true for both companies and also their investors. The second is price wars, as you mentioned, but it's only part of the puzzle. And the reason it's only part of the puzzle is that now more and more people, and this includes consumers too, are looking at are considering what they are sort of getting with the money that they put into things. And this is true for clients, that sometimes the cheapest item might not be the best on the menu. And what I mean by this is that, and this is related to the third thing I wanted to mention, is about the worker skills. It really takes a lot of effort for to have a skilled workforce for these companies. It is often mentioned as unskilled work, but it actually makes a huge difference if a person already has worked in a project before and knows what they're doing. So their training time, their sort of getting up to speed takes a lot less. So the quality of the work might be massively different in terms of having workers that know the project, that understand what they're working on, and can provide good, efficient outputs than those persons who might be willing to do it for a lot less, but then they don't have the necessary sort of the training or the background. And in related to this, especially in terms of companies' investment in these kind of developments and improvements, if it is a better working place, it's only expected that the workers want to stay, instead of looking for work constantly, or paying only half of their attention to the task at hand. They can commit themselves fully because they know that this is a company they would like to work in. And we see huge shifts of workers between companies, especially in cloud work. This is a major, for instance, issue for platforms, because there's always the idea that conditions might be better elsewhere. So in an employment contract, if the company is providing good conditions that are laid out in the contract, that makes a business case for them to then go to clients with that as well. And in terms of the changes, I'd like to also stress that not all of them require financial commitment. Yes, living wage will make an impact, committing to a living wage on a company's budget, on their finances. But how about ensuring that workers will not be discriminated, or that they will have some sort of access, sort of contact or communication channels with the company if they run into major issues. Similarly, it does not really require a lot of financial commitment to ensure that there will be channels where the workers' voices will be heard. So there are things that the companies can already do without massive financial commitments, and I think this is really important to consider. Working conditions, pay is hugely important, but it's not the only thing. Workers also look for other things. feeling of safety, feeling that being heard, and feeling that the work will not cause them burnout, stress level, increased stress levels, or depression. So we need to consider sort of the bigger picture of what the companies can do.
Before passing it on to Janine, I think that we need to be very candid with the language, and we shouldn't be talking about a business if you don't have decent working conditions. We're talking about a sweatshop, we're talking about an exploitation factory, but we're not talking about a business. So we shouldn't be thinking in how to elaborate the business case for labor rights and decent conditions, because we have already agreed upon this as a global society. So we just need to not accept this as a reality.
Yeah, I think I'm actually going to probably repeat everything that everybody said now. But I think the main thing that we need to keep in mind is that these are some of the most profitable businesses in the world, and rich businesses in terms of capital and how much they're investing in the training of their systems. If you think of what OpenAI is paying, I think I read something like $700 million a day to run ChatGPT. I mean, this is huge amounts of money every day being spent, and this is a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of costs, even if all these people were given decent working conditions. So I think that is one thing to be said. And the other thing is, without regulation, yes, you can have some good players, but you're putting pressure on good players if you don't have regulation. So SAMA started off as a nonprofit. It's a social enterprise now. It has a commitment to having good working conditions, or doing what it can to have good working conditions, but others won't see that, and so you're not going to have that without regulation. And this is true. We know this from industrialization. I mean, when you had prior to the minimum wage or occupational safety and health standards, you didn't have an incentive for firms to increase production in a way that was more efficient, because all of the inefficiencies were being borne by the workers. And you see this right now on these platforms where the people work as independent contractors. So Funda was talking about the training. The training is really important. Right now, a worker on a platform, they spend the time training. So they have a lot of unpaid working time in training, or in chasing after payment, or all of these costs that they're absorbing because there's no minimum wage. And so until you change this equation, you're going to have this same issue constantly.
Do you want to comment, Nicola?
Hello everyone. Thank you for the panel. I have a quick question for Janine. I would like to know what do you think about the AI Act just signed, and do you think it will be able to help? Will be able to improve worker condition, for example, and maybe it will be for you. Do you think it will be a standard, a widespread standard, something like that? Thank you very much.
Okay, so I haven't been able to read the text yet. I've only been able to read the newspaper articles, right? And apparently the text isn't available yet. So it's hard for me to answer that. I understand that there is some discussion about fundamental principles at work, so I think that that's a huge step forward. That we have systems in place where we don't have discrimination, where workers can access freedom of association, where you're not being surveyed, so that if you're joining a trade union, you lose your job, for example. So those are all really clear and critical. But on the whole, what we see is that in the discussions about AI, there's a lot of focus on consumers, there's a lot of focus on some of the more really pressing issues, let's say, how warfare. I mean, there's all sorts of issues being discussed that are critical, but the world of work hasn't quite received the attention that it should receive. So I'm not sure exactly whether it's going to be a model, but it's probably an important step forward, but more needs to be done, and more needs to be done on an international scale.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if we have additional questions.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you, panelists, for letting me ask the question. My question is for Alvaro and Jenny, both of you. Like, we have discussed about the upskilling from the basic of software development to the artificial intelligence. During this transition, the companies are also providing its services to their employers to upskill. But what will happen if we completely transition to an AI-driven environment where lots of people are in a upskilled manner and have a proper skills of artificial intelligence? So how can the pay will be maintain a balance towards each of them?
Okay, so if I'm correct, the question is how are we coping with the with artificial intelligence in the workforce, and if it's going to be well taken by governments and regulators. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is well, there's very variables in for this question. So I will probably try to narrow it to my focus, to my region. It's important that, well, for example, the regulators. No, sorry, not the regulators. That we're at this stage, it globally happening that that we have more educated consumers now. People are more aware of the products they buy and who are they buying them from. So that will help companies to have better, that will force companies to have better conditions for their laborers and for their workers. I don't know if that answers the question.
Actually, my main question was like how the pay will be balanced between them. Like if everyone will be upskilled to be able to perform AI applications, then how the pay will be balanced. Like we talk about the AI will remove the jobs as well for the people who are not upskilled. So how the pay will be balanced when all of the people or the most of the people will be upskilled to AI-driven technologies?
Okay. Yeah, so that's a really important point. We have so often it's assumed that if we just skill everybody, that's going to solve a lot of the labor force problems. So you have, in most parts of the world, a very important unskilled population. You obviously need skilled workers. Let's skill them. The problem is then you have a whole bunch of skilled workers and not enough jobs. So it's not enough, or not enough good jobs, because the same race to the bottom that you can have with low skilled workers, you can also have that with skilled workers. And we're seeing that now with many different professions in parts of the world. And so this is where regulation really comes in. I mean, the labor market is, we're not commodities. We can't just be driven by supply and demand. You need regulation to ensure that even if you are skilled, that you're going to be getting the rights and benefits that you should have in your job. So skilling is important, and it's important for a lot of reasons that aren't just about work. Obviously, a more educated and skilled population is a stronghold for democracy, for civil societies, for parenting. I mean, for all sorts of issues. But it does help you in the labor market because it helps you adapt to new skills and it helps you to adapt to changes in the world of work. But it's not going to be enough. You do need to have regulation. You can never leave these things just to the market. And that's why markets have always been regulated. Even when people think, oh, there's no regulation. Well, there is a regulation in place. It's just being regulated by private companies, or it's being regulated by social norms. So on top of these informal types of regulation, you need more formal types of regulations that are decided in a democratic fashion that can give people the rights and benefits that they need.
Thank you.
Additional questions, yeah? Oh, in the back.
Hi, I have two questions actually. So the first one being just your view on the dichotomy between, so there's working conditions and there's better pay. So if research firms are working towards better working conditions to increase the productivity of the workers versus getting better pay. Yes, in an ideal world, we should be improving the working conditions as well as improving the pay. But what's sort of the first battle that the firm should pick to move towards a better world, for example? And
okay, I don't know if I can separate working conditions from better pay because of the way we have, for instance, designed the principles based on the ILO's decent work criteria is that pay is one of the conditions, and the issue I see with focusing only on better pay is that a lot of the risks are then offloaded to the workers. So workers are paid a good salary, but then they're not paid any sort of social protection. They don't get pensions, they don't get any sort of health coverage if it's not universal coverage in the country. They do not get any maternity pay, paternity pay, or if they fall ill or they need to take care of a member of their family who is ill, they can't work for a period of time, then they don't get any pay. So all of these sort of external risks are then, the worker is left alone to their own devices to deal with these risks. So I think I see the risk about, only focusing on pay. If the pay already includes the social protections, then we're already talking about the working conditions in general anyway. But I find it really difficult to do an assessment of either or. I think we need to understand, as Janine said, that we're not commodities. We need to, as humans, we need to think about what are the externalities, what are the risks that we might all experience one day. We might all fall ill, or a member, like a loved one, might fall ill, and we might all of a sudden find ourselves in a place where we're not able to work the way that we can today.
If I could just add to that, what I would say is I wholeheartly agree with Vanda.
Sorry, I didn't know where it was coming from.
We also saw with a study with MIT over 3 years, a random control study, that when you take into consideration holistically both pay and working conditions, the impact is not just on the worker, it's on their family and the community. And ultimately you see better outcomes for their children, whether that's educational or health-wise. See progression in terms of the whole family, getting better work, getting better pay. So I agree with Vanda. It's not something that you have to dissociate. In fact, you have to think of them together. Fair pay, good working conditions, that for example, in my mind include, social benefits as well, are key to helping nurture and create stability in the community of people that surround that person. And we have to always take into consideration the ripple effects of working conditions and pay. If you have bad pay or bad working conditions, you also create environments where I think, the esteemed panelist from Mexico was mentioning as well, bigger disparity creates more violence, creates difficulty, creates, potentially migration for work, etc. But we really have to have both together. It's like all the ingredients that you need to bake a cake. You don't have one of them, the cake doesn't bake. So that's the key element of it. All of those things.
Yes, correct, Alexander. And I also support the idea that to have a better conditions for the workers. There's also have to be a collective effort with the government, so that they can create some campaign to teach or to educate these workers into basic rights that they should ask or they should demand for their companies or the companies that they are hiring them. I think that it's a complicated topic, but the creation of unions that they will have a collective voice will have a deep impact in these conditions, because if large companies have to deal individually with each of these workers, then it's going to be very unfair negotiation. But if they have to, for example, in Latin America, it's around 7 million people live there, and let's say around, I'm not sure about this number in this specific area, but let's say there's 10 million ghost workers in Latin America. If there's a joint effort so that each region or each country, for example, could demand better opportunities and better conditions to their companies that are hiring them, then they will listen. So it's also important to work collectively with governments to have the other part of this regulation and to demand better working conditions.
Can if I can just comment on that, one thing that I do think, to Lucia's point earlier, was we need to be realistic as well. It's very hard to ask somebody who's surviving, who doesn't necessarily have, they're doing this work and they're spending 6 hours preparing for $2, which will help them be able to survive, to then find a collective voice and unionize, and then go against a platform that will eliminate that person as soon as they see this as a threat. And I think it's really important to kind of raise that flag, which is, I'm very pessimistic that if we don't have regulation in place, that the and working conditions and pay will get better. I think without government intervention, especially in this industry, we won't see progress. But we need it, because the quality, and one of the things that considers the quality of AI systems that have people, full-time workers or workers with good pay and working conditions, is better. And there are clear indications that it's less biased, and that the outputs are actually generated exactly what is meant from the system. So there's a real opportunity here for government representatives and to push forward policies that help those in need.
Thank you. I think you had a second question?
Yeah. Just again, your views on, the intersection of, say, gender. So basically, I work with weavers, and what happens is, with the intersection of gender, so females, suppose, have work which is considered less important, valued less important than males in the weaver community. And although we recognize what should be in an ideal community and how they should be treated and paid, how does one look at, from the regulatory point of view, at this intersection, when there is discrimination based on various intersections? Actually, in India, we have the intersection of caste and gender affecting weavers at a massive level that we don't see, that one should see while making policies, for example. Just your thoughts on how this can be incorporated, or...
This is hugely important, as you mentioned, gender, but in other sort of geographies, it might be ethnicity, it might be race, it might be sexual orientation, and it affects not only sort of the direct working conditions of the workers, but also it affects the systems that they train. So if women are not included in the development of the systems, then we see general bias towards the decisions. I can give an example of the one of the tests I made on ChatGPT, for instance. I'm originally Turkish, so I was trying to test whether the response in Turkish will be the same for if I ask as a man and as a woman. And turned out that if I ask as a woman, what happens for a specific sort of case, the result was, divorce. Whereas if I ask as a man, it was a divorce. If I ask as a woman, it was more reconciliation, trying to solve the problems in the marriage, and trying to get through it. So I think we need to understand what these kind of things. And here it's both the gender aspect, but it also is the culture, the language, and whoever trained the system. So we need to be really sort of cognizant and aware of this, and that's why it's so in our fair management principle, we take sort of both the discrimination of the workers very seriously, as well as harassment in the workplace, as well as workers feeling safe and cared for and protected in the workplace. So I think we need to think about it in both ways. One of them is, what kind of a work culture are we imagining, and we want to establish for it to be a decent work culture. But on the other hand, we also need to think about the implications of this in terms of the broader systems in which these cultures are then creating.
I think AI has a gender problem across the board, from the center to the periphery, and this is something that should be definitely tackled. Do you want to comment something else? Okay.
Thank you. I was going through the 5 points of evaluation, that is 5 principles from the Sama case study. So I was wondering about one factor that should be included when we are talking about good work conditions. That is the growth perspective. It's not just the pay. It's not just the other factors which you have talked about, but also one always look for the growth in the organization and all this thing. So have you included this while evaluating in these 5 principles, or like one should also look forward towards the growth within the organization, even beyond that as well? So do you have this point in the evaluation?
Sorry, can you explain what you mean by broad perspective?
Growth.
Growth
So growth, yeah,
perspective.
growth perspective.
So the direct answer is no, because we're looking at a company at a specific sort of time, and while we of course understand their business interests, and this is part of our engagement with them, we try to hear obviously always their side and what is possible within the current confines of the system in which they operate, what is possible, what is not possible, when it can be made possible in terms of a sort of a future time plan. But growth is not necessarily one of the things that affect workers immediately. The way it works is that if the company is growing, then they might be able to commit to, let's say, longer term sort of contracts rather than very short term ones. Or if they're a more sustainable, financially sustainable company, they can perhaps commit to living wage than another company that is perhaps struggling financially. So we understand that perspective, and we try to identify it and talk with the management of the companies which we rate. But at the same time, on a day-to-day basis, we look at the working conditions.
So yeah, I was actually trying to evaluate my organization based on these parameters. So the thing is that, of course, the pay is average, but the work condition is very good. But what I can see that I'm seeing growth in the organization when where I'm working currently. So I'm happy. So the thing is that this should be one of the factor, in my opinion, where growth should be included, because it's human nature. It's not just the security, but at the same time, one should always look forward to the growth as an individual and within the organization as well.
It's one of those, if I can just comment, it's one of those things that we do emphasize. Whether it's included in the scoring, I think is worth having a discussion about how people have career paths, but there are 2 career paths to consider. The first one that we have is a lot of people that can actually, get better jobs within the company, which pay better, give better. So for example, a data annotator can move to, for example, being a team lead, move to being a quality assurance manager. And that gives them progression and opportunities going forward. The second thing that we survey a lot internally is the idea of progression out of the organization. We're a bridge and so our main goal is actually to help people go from underemployed to having skills to get into the formal economy and do something else. So we participate with different external organizations like University of Arizona, but we also have our own organized internal university called SAMA U, which has courses in it, et cetera, to give skills for people. And that for us is a huge element that we track progression internally and then progression externally. And one other thing that we've started doing for the past few years is actually there's a lot of people that want to be entrepreneurs. And so we've created the Give Work Challenge, which is this idea that our alumni could actually get funded and get workspaces for their startups. And those startups can be as simple as, for example, a bag making company in Uganda, to a cosmetic company in Kenya. And we're seeing a lot of ownership over that because people sometimes want to work for somebody, but they also want to have a business. And some people want to work for us for their whole career, but most people want to have access to other opportunities, and we want to help them have that choice. And we believe as a principle that is a very powerful thing, that to give agency to people on where they progress and make sure that they have opportunities up and out, that those are supported in different ways.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. That clarified the question for me. I'm really sorry, but it seems I understood company growth and not the worker growth, not skills development, as a question, and that's why I was saying we focus on the working conditions. In terms of skills development, yes, it's a hugely important field, and perhaps it's not in any particular principle because we look at it through in multiple principles, such as in fair conditions, in terms of the kind of company benefits and what is provided to workers, and also in fair management, because it shows that the management is open to these kind of upskilling and going through sort of advancement. So yes, it is there, but I misunderstood the question. Sorry.
Just really quickly on this point. So you can have career development in a company like Alex's because there is an employment relationship. But on these platforms where you just register as an independent contractor, there isn't any of that. And the real problem is if somebody worked on Amazon Mechanical Turk for 4 years and then they want to go get a job somewhere else, they have no way of proving that they worked on Amazon Mechanical Turk for 4 years. So this is a real issue. When you see a lot of people, university graduates, getting into this platform work, thinking it's great, and then you find yourself, geez, I have nobody who give me a recommendation for all the great work that I did for 4 years. So this is something that really needs to be addressed.
Okay, and on this note, I think that we are going to conclude. But before we do so, I'd like to extend an invitation to our audience. If you're interested in being part of this exciting journey at JIPA and you would like to contribute with us in our projects, please reach out. I think that your participation and insights would be invaluable. We have seen this now with this very interesting conversation. And we thank you, especially you, Alex, for the effort. We are super happy to have you in the panel. It's been delightful. And thank you to the panelists and to the audience. Have a great day ahead. Thank you all.
beats on the track.